Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. So today we're doing two things. One, I am teaching you how to paint waves like an ocean scene, an ocean sunset scene. And two, I am going to be testing out these acrylic gouache paints. So for the second half of this video, I am teaching you how to paint waves with watercolor because this is primarily a watercolor channel. So if you want to learn how to paint waves with just watercolor, skip to the second half of the video. I'll put a timestamp down below in the description. But if you're interested in seeing me test out these acrylic gouache paints by Liquitex, that's the first thing I'm going to be doing. So what is acrylic gouache? So we know that regular gouache is a thicker paint and it's opaque and it comes out with a matte finish and you can reactivate it with water. Acrylic gouache is a little different. Let's just read the back and see what it says. Meet acrylic gouache, the most highly pigmented of all our paints with a solid flat matte finish, so it kind of looks like a gouache. Intense color, no brush strokes, no cracking, and no need to dilute. It has all the qualities of a conventional gouache with the permanent stability and durability of acrylic. So unlike regular gouache, this cannot be reactivated with water, so once they dry on your palette, you can't reactivate them, and once they're dry on your paper, you can't re-wet them either and blend anything out. So let's give them a try and learn how to paint some waves today. Okay, so before we start, I just kind of wanted to give you a little lesson on light and shadow when it comes to waves. Okay, so we're gonna imagine that the light coming back here is the sun. We're gonna imagine that this is a wave. So I'm gonna try and create a wave here. Okay, so here's like a peak of a wave. Okay, so you see how it curves up. This curved part is in front of the sun. So the sun is coming from the back and creating a shadow where the peak is. So I want you to think about this when we're painting the waves. So all the peaks are gonna be darker, but where the waves kind of flatten out, there's gonna be some light here. So it's gonna be light and then gradually darkening as we get to the top of the peak. So let's hope that translates through the painting. Okay, so I'm gonna start by filling my palette. So I'm using primary blue, primary red, primary yellow, and titanium white. So consistency-wise, it kind of looks like craft paint. I don't know, we'll see what happens. And then for this painting with the gouache, I am using my Princeton Select brushes. I have an angular shader, I have a filbert, I have a round, a liner, and a flat shader. I don't know which ones I'm going to use, but I just kind of have them all here. You can use your watercolor brushes, it doesn't matter. So the paper I'm going to be using today, I am just going to be painting in my Etchr Lab cold press watercolor sketchbook. Usually I would do gouache on hot pressed, but this paper actually doesn't have a lot of toothy texture, so it's great for gouache too. It's going to be a sunset painting. So I'm going to mix my... It's gonna be a sunset ocean painting is what I'm trying to say. So I'm gonna mix a little bit of my blue into a lot of my white, because if I remember, traditional gouache dries darker, so I want it fairly light, okay? And I'm gonna start, we're gonna be doing the gouache up here and watercolor down here. So I'm gonna start by laying it down here in the background. So remember on the box it said you don't need to dilute it. So you just kind of use it straight out of the tube, I guess. I just put a little bit of water on my brush just because it's not stretching so far and water kind of helps it stretch a little bit further. I don't know. Just added a bit more water. I want to make it lighter. And then I'm going to grab more white, because as we come down further, it is going to blend into like a sunset. So I'm just going back and forth. Okay, and if you know, blue and orange are contrasting colors. So if they mix, they are gonna be a little bit of a shade of brown. So you kind of want that white in between so they don't mix too much. Okay, and I'm gonna wash off my brush. I actually think I should have made that a little bit higher. It's fine. Okay, I'm going to mix a little bit of red, a a little bit of yellow, a little bit more yellow, and then a bunch of white. I'm gonna move it over here. A bunch more. Okay, you know what? We're just gonna mix it here. Okay, okay. And I'm just gonna slowly bring it up into the blue, but I'm gonna add white so it blends a bit better, not as orange. I don't know how this is gonna turn out. I'm having my doubts right now. But I had my doubts with that pumpkin and it turned out well, so let's see. Okay, I think I need more white. A little bit more yellow. So far it just looks like stripes. Okay. I don't like it so far. I feel like I went too far down. I feel like I'm also gonna need a bit more white. Let's try and blend this yellow with it. It's not working. Okay, because we want a kind of a nice gradient from blue to like a light yellow to orange, like that. Okay, that's better. Just gonna keep working it. Okay, and I want a little bit more white up here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring some of this orange down into the water. A little bit more. I'm gonna grab a little more of my orange. Bring it up a little bit more. Try and blend it in with our yellow a bit. A bit more white. I don't know. And then we're gonna go blue towards the bottom because that sunset is gonna be blending into, the sunshine is gonna be reflecting into the water. I need more white. So I'm kind of starting off with a lighter tone here in the water. There's a little bit of peach in there. We're gonna add more peach in there. Add a bit of water. See if I can thin it out a bit. Okay, so there we have it. So that wasn't as easy as I felt like it was. I'm so used to watercolor. I used to paint, you know, landscapes with acrylic long time ago, but it's been so long and I just feel like I'm so used to watercolor. It's just so difficult to get the hang of. Okay, so it's still a little bit wet, which is why I'm able to still blend. Garbage truck being loud. Okay, and now we're gonna start putting in our mid-tone waves. So in order to do this, we're gonna make kind of like a mid-tone color. I'm gonna use my round brush and I'm just gonna grab a little bit of red and then more blue, just to make it a bit of a darker blue, but not too dark. Okay, and I'm gonna start by making the waves. We're gonna just be doing kind of like stretched out mountains, like that. Okay, so I'm just gonna throw that in there. And the closer they are to the bottom, the more in the foreground, the bigger they are. And then the further back and smaller they're gonna be towards the horizon line, okay? So I'm gonna just do a couple like this. I'm gonna wash off my brush and blend it out a bit. Get a little bit of that lighter blue. Okay. Try and blend those together to get a mid-tone, like, so you get kind of like a nice soft gradient from that dark to light. Again, grabbing a bit of darkness. Okay, you can even grab a little bit more light and put it I don't know what I'm doing, let's be honest. Okay, let's do another wave. Let's grab a bit more darker. I'm gonna do another one here. Stretch it out. Do another one maybe. I'm gonna grab a bit of that mid blue or that lighter blue so it kind of fades out. And we are gonna add highlights that will help make it look a bit better. Okay, feeling like this is looking a little bit too uniform. Little wave here. Okay, and then they're gonna get a little flatter as we go back. Smaller. Okay. I don't know why this gives me such anxiety. Just waves and water have always been like a mystery to me. I haven't found somebody that can explain it as well as I need it to be explained. And so it's quite difficult. That is way too much paint on there. Okay. Okay, just darkening it up a bit. Okay, and then as we get further back, we're just gonna kind of do some little ripples. We're gonna see once I do this with watercolor if it's easier or not, because so far this is just so out of my comfort zone. Okay, I'm gonna take my medium blue and try and blend it together. See, it doesn't blend after because it dries fast. I'm gonna just have to work in layers, I guess. So I'm kind of going over those dark parts to blend it out. I hope I'm helping explain it a little bit because I'm still trying to figure it out myself. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just failing all of you. Oh God. So I'm just gonna grab this medium tone and just kind of keep doing those little waves back here. Actually, I might just do my horizon just so I know where it is. You want to leave some of that peach in there because those are like part of the highlights. Just adding a bit of water so it spreads out a bit better. I find it interesting that on the bottle it said no need to dilute because I'm clearly feeling that this needs to be diluted. Right as you get back here, like the tiniest little, you can even use a smaller brush, that might be better. We're gonna put some darker bits in there even more. Okay, so I'm gonna grab a bit more red, a bit of yellow, and then more blue. So I wanna make this dark blue. Let's just mix all that blue up. There we go. So it's not just a dark purple by adding that yellow in, you're just getting a darker blue. Color theory. Okay, so let's go in here and make it a bit darker, especially. There we go. See, that helps a little bit, right? See, okay, these dark waves are really kind of making it pop a bit more. I need to focus on what I'm talking about. Okay, so we got those mid-tones in there before this, and then adding those little pops of darkness really kind of makes it jump out at you. And I'm gonna connect some of the waves a bit, I think. I just see too many like triangles. So I'm just gonna try and connect some of them. So there we go. I think I'm just gonna try and add a little bit more darkness to just like some of the peaks, because that's where it would be the darkest, where the sun's not hitting it. Okay, and then I'm gonna go in with some more white, maybe some of that peach. So we're gonna mix a little bit of that peach and a lot of more of the white and just hit a bit more. So the peaks are where the shadows are gonna be, and then the flat bits in between are where the sun would reflect off of. So you can drag a bit of that peach sky into those flat bits. Maybe a bit more peach. Get a little bit of that white. And really add some of those highlights, especially behind the peaks and the flat parts in between here. So I'm gonna take my white, just pure white, and I'm gonna do it as if the sun is coming down. I think I have too much water on my brush. Let's get some sparkle going. So just tiny, tiny little dots, especially hitting the tops of those peaks. Okay, just for a little bit of sparkle. Like that. A bit more back here. Like that. You can do some over on the sides of here. Like that. Like that. I don't know how I feel about the acrylic gouache. Maybe I have to try it with regular gouache to see if the blending would be any different, but so far I'm just not as used to gouache as I am to watercolor. So with that said, let's try this now with watercolor. And I will be using the white gouache for the sparkle on the watercolor waves. Okay, so let's hope that the sound quality isn't too bad, because I think I'm just gonna do the sped up version of this and a voiceover. So the first thing I did was wet the whole background with my mop brush. It's a Princeton Select brush. You don't have to use that. You can just use a big brush. And then I used cobalt blue to start with the sky. Already I know that, you know, watercolor gradients are just so much easier to do. The blending is so much easier, especially when you're doing the wet on wet technique, my favorite thing to do. So I just went at the top and the bottom with that cobalt blue, making it nice and light, always starting light because you can always go darker, but you can't go lighter with watercolor. Then I mixed a little bit of permanent rose and cadmium orange for the sky. And I'm just plopping that in the middle. And then as the orange sky kind of gets close to the blue, I'm just adding a bit more water so the orange and the blue don't mix and turn kind of brown. And then once I intensified the sky a bit more with color, I started putting in my waves. My background is still wet, so I just got a bit more cobalt blue on my brush, and I'm doing the same wave technique, starting with that mid-tone, the cobalt blue, for the darker waves, and I will go darker later, but we just want to start with that mid-tone color. So starting with those stretched out mountain peaks, and then as you go further back, you're making them a little bit more stretched out and a little thinner and a little smaller. So you just keep doing that. And if your paper starts to dry, it's totally okay. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna have a sharp line for that peak. And because you don't want it sharp at the bottom, you want it to blend well, you're gonna do the sharp line of the dark cobalt blue, then you're gonna wash off your brush, dry it on your paper towel, and blend out the bottom part of that wave, because that will create a nice gradient going from the dark peak down to kind of like a lighter gradient, a lighter color, and it will blend out, if that makes sense. I'll show you what I mean about that in a minute. So I'm just going to continue doing those tiny little waves at the back, and I'm always making sure not to go too dark. Also, I am using a size 6 brush for this because if I use a bigger brush, I might have more water on my brush, and then it could, create blooms everywhere. Okay, so now I am going back in with some darker color, and I'm going to show you how I blend this out. Hit those peaks. So my paper is still wet, but it's not like sopping wet. So the technique for this part is to lay down that dark color, take the pigment off in your water jar, and then just tap your brush on the paper towel to dry it off before you blend out the bottom. Wash off my brush, dry it, blend it down. Okay, and I still want to maintain these light areas here. So some of it's starting to dry. You can see that my lines are getting sharper. That's okay. Just gonna wash on my brush again, dry it, blend it out. Okay, if it starts to dry, that's okay. Actually, might even work better because we can just blend out the bottom of those peaks and the tops will be nice and sharp. It's pretty dark. Okay, wash, dry, blend. And I am going to go over those front ones with a bit more color too, don't worry. Okay, so you're just going to continue putting in those darker waves and then go over them a little bit darker if you need to make them a bit more defined. Just make sure you have that contrast for the light flat parts of the water and then the dark peaks. Okay, it will really add a little bit of realism to your work. So one other thing that I decided to do was bring the darkness in those peaks down. So those peaks are almost kind of like a stretched out pointed oval, if that makes sense. And it just adds a little bit more height to the peaks, bringing that darkness down a little bit. Just make sure you blend it out really nice and softly by washing off your brush, tapping it on your paper towel to dry it, and then blending it out. And the reason why we do that is because we don't want a whole bunch of water when we go back over to blend it out, because that water could push the pigment away and create blooms, and that's not what we want. So just continue to blend, add some more darkness, and it will come together really nicely. Okay, so then I just went back over the sky with some water, and I just wanted to add a bit more color to intensify it a little bit, because when watercolor dries, sometimes it dries lighter. So I just wanted to add a little bit more color to make it a bit brighter. And then I grabbed a little bit of that peach color and just tapped it in some of the highlighted areas in the water. And then lastly, I waited for the whole thing to dry and I added my gouache white sun, and then I'm going to add the little flecks of light and highlight on the waves like we did with the gouache painting. So looking back, one of the things that I could have done with this watercolor painting is when I was doing the sky originally, I could have added a little bit of water right where that sun was going to be, so there would have been a nice kind of natural gradient of like a bright sun just from the white paper. But I didn't think of that. So I ended up using gouache, and it's a little bit more detailed, but yeah. So that's basically it. And now for the most satisfying part, taking that tape off to see that nice white crisp border. I think that's any artist's favorite part, and just seeing how it looks. Okay, so there you go. I am pretty impressed with myself. I struggled a little bit at the beginning with painting this scene, and also just trying to work with gouache in general I find is newer to me, and it's something I really need to get the hang of. I definitely had an easier time with the watercolor. I'm just more familiar with blending it out, but I think they both came out pretty decently well, and I hope you guys learned how to paint waves. I hope it was more of a tutorial than just watching me struggle at the beginning, and it made sense because water is something I have struggled with in the past, and I found it a little complicated to kind of wrap my head around all the different shades and where to put them and all that jazz. But I think I got a better handle of it, and I hope it came across in the video, and I hope you learned something. So let me know in the comments which one you like better. Did you like the gouache or the watercolor, and which one you had an easier time with if you end up trying both? As always, thank you guys so much for watching my video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow me on Instagram for even more. That's the line. Yeah. Have a great day, guys. Bye.